So, are you coachable? This is a question that many people forget to ask themselves going into pretty much any job interview. And so to be clear here, the way I define coachability is on your willingness to accept external input with the main purpose of accelerating whatever you're working on. In this case, the job interview preparation or the behavior interview preparation in general. So in this video, I'm going to touch upon some of the key points that I believe relate with coachability. The first of them, and probably the most boring of them all, is your ability to listen. Also listen to your heart, but the idea is that you should listen to what other people, that is a coach, have to say. So are you someone willing to take in information from other? Are you someone likely to consider that feedback seriously? So this would be the first one. The second one is where it gets even more interesting. That is, can you trust others with their advice? Can you take feedback more personally in a way? Are you willing to make yourself vulnerable in such a coaching session? Are you willing to talk about your weakness with a job interview coach? My experience has shown that this is quite a serious problem. And besides the fact that, this is not a very common interview question, what's your weakness? But I see people who struggle a lot talking about their weaknesses to someone else. That is myself or a group of other people. So you must have this ability to trust others. And next, the number 3 here is all sorts of biases. For example, do you have a nationality bias? Like, I'm Romanian, so do you have a problem being coached by a Romanian? If so, then, don't book me. Or other types of interesting biases on, like maybe your coach is too old, or maybe your coach is too young. Maybe you would feel like their wording is not the best, and it doesn't represent you. They cannot build a rapport with you in some sort. There are all sorts of biases that can play into a coaching session. And of course, maybe the report one is a more serious one, so maybe it's also the coach's fault here. But for the other biases like nationality, race, gender, age, these are types of biases that are more often encountered than you might think, and are a serious detractor to one's preparation for pretty much anything. Number 4 here, negativity. Or are you a pessimist? If you're a pessimist, then you're very little likely to be someone who's easily coachable. So think about it. And usually the scenario is like this. People want to switch jobs because they're not happy with their current role, with their current boss, and all that stuff. And more often than not, they're not happy because they pass through a period of high stress. And when you pass through periods of high stress, you are negative, you are a pessimist. So in those periods, you're not likely to perform better at your best capacity. So actually, this is a very common reason for which recruiters prefer to pass on candidates, because they feel like this person is not passing through a period of their life where they are when they are at the best of their performance. So that's why they prefer to pass on this candidate. So negativity and pessimism are a very strong indicator of one's ability, of one's coachability, on whether someone is coachable or not. The next point that I want to touch upon here is on whether someone is genuinely interested in their growth. And of course, you would say, why wouldn't I be interested in my growth if I'd be applying for a better job? Right, but it's not that simple. The type of growth that I'm talking about here, especially when it relates to behavioral interviewing, is that when you prepare for a behavioral interview, you actually prepare for behavioral questions. You actually prepare to answer questions in a way that it makes more sense. In a way, behavioral interviewing is not only for the phone or the on-site interview. It's not for the interviewing process. It's something that's meant to have a broader impact. So your own growth is at stake here from day one, to quote from Amazon. But your own growth is at stake here by simply learning behavioral interviewing. So if you employ a more transactional approach, that in which you would just come up with answers to as many questions as possible, and as good answers. I'm not saying bad answers, but just memorize them and just try to move on as quickly as possible. I'm not sure that you are a very coachable person. I'm not saying you're doing wrong. Maybe you know what you're doing. That's another story. But with respect to coachability, I don't think that's a strong element of coachability, unless you take this seriously as, you know, for your personal development. The coaching session, right? The job is already for your personal development, but the coaching session should be also for your personal development. The number 6 I want to touch upon here is on whether the respective candidate is someone that's actually changing because of your feedback. So I know I said the number 1 was ability to listen, but are you also acting upon that feedback? And I've seen many people who perfectly understand what I'm saying, perfectly understand what I'm talking about, but when we go to our next session, it's like nothing changed. So they still went their own way. They still did things their own way. So it's one thing to listen and to understand the feedback, and the other thing to act upon that feedback. Like, and you might say, okay, but what if I disagree? Well, okay, then disagree on the spot. Like, it should be a conversation, a dialogue, not a monologue. So this is another point that's very important to your coachability index, if I may call it like this, on whether you can act upon receiving that feedback, whether you can improve yourself, whether you can change. And change is hard, as you might already know. Now, the second point, and the last one I'm going to talk about here, is on whether you are willing to have difficult conversations. And to put it in very straightforward terms, are you willing to talk about your failures with your coach? Like your real failures. Like, for me, I mean, it's common practice that I have to ask people for 3 failures in a row just to get the third time to start scratching the surface of the true failure. So this, and by the way, here, this is why companies use these failure stories as a screening mechanism, because they want to see on whether you are someone willing to have some level of discomfort and to have difficult conversations about yourself. Because if you don't, then it's problematic, because you're not someone who's going to learn a lot, to be willing to learn and to be willing to develop empathy for other people. So if you don't recognize your own mistakes, if you're not comfortable talking about your mistakes, your failures, your difficulties, then it's a question mark for coachability as well. So there you go. I hope you found at least some of this information useful. And if you do want to support this channel, please feel free to share your interview outcomes in the comment sections of the videos. And thank you very much for watching.